Imagine you're sitting in a meeting where the boss has asked for input on a critical decision. Your company's future might depend on this choice. Now imagine that the loudest person in the room is someone with no experience in the industry, someone who got promoted because of charisma alone, someone who lacks the competence to make such an important decision. As frustrating as it might be to deal with, this situation is actually the perfect example of the Dunning-Kruger effect in action. In today's video, we'll be exploring the Dunning-Kruger effect and why smart people like you tend to underestimate their intelligence. Let's dive in. So the Dunning-Kruger effect was identified by two social psychologists, Cornell University's David Dunning and University of Michigan's Justin Kruger, in a study they published in 1999. Through a series of tests measuring logic, grammar, and humor, they observed a very interesting pattern. Those who scored the lowest on the tests greatly overestimated their abilities, thinking they were much smarter than they were. Meanwhile, those with the highest scores consistently underestimated them. To understand what was happening, they came up with a simple yet effective analogy. Imagine a closed room full of people. They can only see the top half of the other participants. Each person can only see the partial view of everyone else's heads in the room. Without being able to see the entirety of the other people's faces, those present start comparing themselves based solely on what they can see. Naturally, each person assumes they are at the average level of intelligence based on the limited view they have. But this assumption falls apart when they start exchanging positions and end up at the bottom half of the circle, where they can now see the top half of the other participants' faces. At this point, they realize they haven't been seeing the whole picture. Some people's heads were much larger than others, meaning they are smarter than they initially thought. Conversely, those whose heads were smaller suddenly appeared much smarter than those who had previously thought they were at the average level. Now let's replace the word head with intelligence. The same thing happens. You're comparing apples to oranges, or rather brains to brains. Everyone is at a different level. People who are better than you have more to show, while those who are worse often have less to show. To illustrate this, Dunning and Kruger used a ruler as a metaphor for intelligence. They theorized that people have a limited amount of cognitive ability that they can put toward understanding any given subject. For instance, the length of the ruler represents the total amount of cognitive resources available to a person. If you're trying to measure your knowledge of ancient Rome, you might use only a portion of your available cognitive resources. This segment of the ruler becomes the measuring stick for your knowledge of ancient Rome. Dunning and Kruger argued that there are two ways a person can appear smarter than they actually are. First, they can either use more of their ruler to measure the topic at hand, meaning they've dedicated more of their cognitive resources to it, or second, they can compare themselves to someone else who is using less of their ruler to measure the same topic. When we encounter someone who has dedicated more cognitive resources to a subject than we have, we can easily determine that they are smarter than us. However, Dunning and Kruger noticed that people often fail to consider both sides of this comparison. Instead, they only compare the length of their own ruler to that of others without considering whether the other person is using more of their ruler. This creates a distorted perception of intelligence. In the context of the original study, participants were better at recognizing others who were smarter than them in terms of logic, grammar, and sense of humor. However, they failed to recognize that they themselves were also smarter than average in these areas. Dunning and Kruger concluded that people tend to forget that they are simultaneously both smarter and dumber than others, depending on the context. Research has also shown that the Dunning-Kruger effect influences people's confidence in their ability to acquire new skills, which is another way of saying people are bad at predicting how long it will take them to become competent. A classic example is language learning. A recent study demonstrated that the less proficient a language learner is, the more confident they feel. As they progress and begin to approach fluency, their confidence levels plummet until they reach the point of proficiency, where their confidence starts to rise again. Interestingly, this confidence remains high until the point of near fluency, at which point it drops off again. Basically, it takes time for people to realize how much they don't know about a language, and then it takes even longer for them to realize how much they still don't know. But what explains this fascinating phenomenon? Well, Dunning proposed that there are two primary factors at play: cognitive ability and motivational biases. Those who possess higher cognitive ability are generally more skilled at critical thinking, analyzing information, and problem solving. This makes them better equipped to understand complex concepts and challenge their own beliefs and assumptions. However, their advanced reasoning skills can also lead to a decreased willingness to engage in self-reflection. After all, reflecting involves examining one's own thoughts, beliefs, and actions, which can be uncomfortable and emotionally taxing, especially when you have a lot of strong opinions about things. This is called metacognitive inefficiency. On the other hand, individuals with lower cognitive ability may struggle with critical thinking and analyzing information effectively. They might resort to simpler forms of reasoning, relying on intuition or heuristics instead. However, this simplicity can lead to motivated reasoning, meaning they are more likely to accept information that confirms their existing beliefs and reject information that challenges them. The result is a sort of self-reinforcing loop where their limited cognitive ability leads to biased reasoning, which in turn feeds their overconfidence. Dunning further explains that the motivation behind the desire to appear intelligent differs between high and low ability individuals. Those with higher ability often seek to demonstrate their knowledge and critical thinking skills in order to gain recognition, status, and respect from others. However, individuals with lower ability are primarily motivated to protect their self-esteem and maintain a positive self-image. They want to appear smart to protect themselves from feeling stupid. These cognitive and motivational differences lead to a paradoxical situation. Those with a higher ability are less likely to question their own intelligence due to metacognitive inefficiency, while those with a lower ability are more likely to overestimate their intelligence due to a combination of cognitive limitations and motivational biases. In essence, the Dunning-Kruger effect highlights the human tendency to perceive ourselves as better or worse than we really are. It reminds us that cognitive ability is a complex interplay of reasoning skills and self-awareness. While it might seem intuitive to assume that those with higher abilities would also possess greater self-awareness, the reality is more nuanced. Our cognitive abilities are shaped by a variety of factors, including our education, experiences, and personal motivations. The Dunning-Kruger effect serves as a reminder that intelligence is not a single, easily quantifiable trait, and that our perceived intelligence can be influenced by a range of cognitive and motivational forces. It also reminds us that humility and intellectual openness are essential for personal growth and understanding. By embracing humility, we acknowledge our own biases and limitations, allowing us to learn from others and challenge our own perspectives. Intellectual openness, on the other hand, involves a willingness to consider alternative viewpoints and a commitment to seeking out diverse experiences and perspectives. Together, humility and intellectual openness can help us navigate the complexities of human intelligence and appreciate the richness and diversity of human thought. So, do you think you're guilty of this? Do you think you fall victim to the Dunning-Kruger effect sometimes? It's a pretty common phenomenon that can affect all of us in many situations. Don't get discouraged if you find yourself in this position. It's an opportunity to learn and grow. Remember, true confidence comes from knowing your strengths and acknowledging your limits. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Subscribe for more psychology videos and leave a comment below. If you'd like to learn more about how the brain works, check out our related content. Thanks for watching.